Hey everyone, I usually don't do interviews, but today I couldn't pass it up because this is with Michael Landsberg, who, as you know, is the biggest mental health advocate in all of Canada or even in North America. So I think
Well,
that
no. Let's go with the world, maybe the
the world.
universe.
Let's hope.
There's a dude on Pluto who is doing a great job of advocating for mental health there. But other than that, I'm the man.
Let's hope so. So Michael Landsberg, as you may know, is the founder of Sick Not Weak, which we're going to get into today. And we're also going to talk about both of our struggles with depression and anxiety and things in that nature. So I want to start off, Michael, by asking you, when did you find Sick Not Weak?
Sick Not Weak was the evolution of how I saw mental illness. And I certainly had never thought about it before 2009 because I had never spoken publicly about my mental illness. Not because I was ashamed or embarrassed, because I never was. I'd never used the platform on Off the Record to make the point, because I didn't know there would be an advantage. I didn't know that I would be helping anyone. I mean, that kind of stupid on my part to go, wow, who knew there was a stigma? But I never thought about it. And then all of a sudden in 2009, coming off the worst year of my life, depression-wise, we had Stéphane Richer as a guest on the show. Stéphane Richer, Montreal Canadian, New Jersey Devil, two-time Stanley Cup champion, Rookie of the Year, last Montreal Canadian to score 50 goals. I mean, the guy was a star. And I had read moments before I went to greet him that he had battled depression in the 1990s. So I thought, oh, that'll make an interesting question. I wasn't thinking of even mentioning myself in that context. So I asked him, I said, hey, Stéphane, come outside for a sec. I want to ask you something. Would it be okay if I asked you about your depression? Because I think your fans would like to know that. And he said, it's very painful. I don't like to talk about it. So I said, well, if you'll talk about it, I'll talk about it. And he said, what would you talk about? And I explained it to him. And he said, okay. So we went on the air. We talked for maybe 2 minutes of our own experiences. And that changed my life. It literally changed the direction of my life. It changed it slightly when I realized we were making good TV, but it changed it 180 degrees when I started getting emails, mostly from men, and all of them saying that it was the first time in their life they've heard two men talking casually about their depression. And because of that, they were empowered to reach out to me. And I kept seeing this word all the time. And that word was weakness. All the time, I heard from guys saying, I was always afraid that I'd be perceived as weak. I would be seen as being a weak individual, that people would think this is my fault and because I'm weak. And it kind of stuck. So when I was giving a speech early on after that, I said, I was debating with someone and I said, here's the thing. I'm sick. Like I can't say that mental illness is not a sickness, because if I'm saying that, then my whole argument goes out the window. It is a sickness.
Very much. Yeah.
Hold on. Let the dramatic pause go here. It is a sickness, but not a weakness. And it kind of just started from then. So that would have been about like 2010, 2011. And I started doing more talks. And I did a documentary for CTV called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports and Me. TSN was purchased by Bell. So all of a sudden there's Bell Let's Talk Day. And it just seemed like I was given many, many opportunities to come out and talk about my mental illness. I chose to try to do it as many times as possible. And then we determined, when I say we, Casey and I, my daughter, thought, let's do something more formal, sort of like where it's almost like you want a clubhouse. And the clubhouse would be a website, obviously, and in even bigger picture would be a charity. So we applied for charitable foundation status and we got it in 2018. And that's how Sick Not Weak was born.
Wow, that's great, because at the time too, I remember you just mentioned your documentary, which was, I believe, released in 2012. And I went back and rewatched that actually yesterday. And you had Stéphane Richer on there, you had Clara Hughes, even Roddy Piper was on there. So as many of these listeners are pro wrestling fans, Roddy Piper even confided in you during that time, saying that even though he was the biggest heel in professional wrestling during the 80s and even early 90s, and perhaps even in pro wrestling history, he candidly told you, yes, I have had suicidal thoughts. And yes, a lot of these instances have affected me, because there is a story too in Roddy Piper's book where he was in Mexico and he was being a heel. and he got shot and stabbed during the ring, like when he was in the ring, which was unreal. And I'm sure that for the rest of his life, that played some kind of toll on him, even though, you know, it's in character, right? Because pro wrestling's based off characters and storylines. But to hear him say that and be public with it and released, it's like, man, it really shows that a lot of us have this internal struggle that we don't want to admit. And we don't want to admit it because we're afraid we're going to be judged. So
because we're afraid to be perceived as weak.
Yes. Exactly.
And then when a strong person says, hey, I battled depression, and it's taken me down, and it's messed with my self-confidence. Mm-hmm. When a strong person says that, you can't come away with the conclusion it's a weakness. Mm-hmm. You come away with the conclusion that, hey, if that guy, Roddy Piper, can handle it, or I shouldn't say can't handle it, if he sees it as a sickness and needs to be treated for it, then, you know, why shouldn't I be? But the story behind that is was totally by chance. So we had this plan that we were going to shoot behind the scenes and off the record for the documentary on a given day. So we didn't book it because Roddy Piper was on. I think it was on with Mick Foley. We booked it because of the date. So it could have been anyone, but it was those two guys. And then Roddy Piper's up in the green room, and that's where you saw what you saw. And I said to him, you know, because I knew him from doing Off the Record before, and I could tell that he liked me. You know, like you can tell that it's not just all business, like that we kind of bonded. So I say to him, you know, we're shooting a documentary about depression. Do you want the cameras off or the cameras on, right? Because, you know, I don't want to invade his privacy when we're not on the air. And he said, I'll leave the cameras on. I said, you know, do you have any relationship to mental illness? And he goes, you kidding? He goes, yeah. And then I said, have you ever had suicidal thoughts? And then he went, that's the worst thing for me. You know, and you could see that he was coming out of whatever character Roddy was when he was in his walk around character. Yes. It wasn't the guy in the ring, but also it wasn't 100% him. Mm-hmm. So he said, that's my biggest problem. You know, sometimes I just get up and, you know, I just don't know if I can go on. And so we got this great clip from him, and it was totally by chance.
And you could tell even by the look on his face too that it was 100% genuine.
100%.
Like just the way he was looking at you and the way you could tell by the tone of his voice that it was something that was on his shoulders for a long time that he really wanted to come out with. But because Roddy in WWE and in pro wrestling in general was always looked at as the biggest heel commodity, you can't, when you're a heel in the business, you can't show weakness. And I say weakness with pun intended, because in pro wrestling, it's all masculinity. It's all about being this huge guy, literally and figuratively. And Piper, even though he wasn't the biggest guy in stature, he had the biggest mouth. And he had to show that every week for 30, 35 years. And to finally let loose like that, I'm sure it was a big release for him. Unfortunately, Roddy's not with us anymore and passed away in 2015, unfortunately, of a heart attack.
That was so sad.
But he's somebody I wish I really could have met. He's somebody I wish I could have collaborated with, because I did read his book, which is Roddy. And if you have read it, it's 100% recommended, 5 stars. And even if you're not a pro wrestling fan, it's a book you got to read, because it shows his childhood. It shows the stuff he went through as a child, living on the street and coming up as a wrestler with all the trials and tribulations. And he got bullied a lot too, you know, like similar to how I did. And from my perspective, I got bullied the same way, you know, like where I was told, hey, you're too fat, or you're too small, or you look like this, or you look like that. And that can really, that can play with your psyche quite a bit, even though it's small words. It definitely does. It definitely does affect you. And the best example I can come up with too, and I'm sure you've seen it too, is Mauro Ranallo's Bipolar Rock and Roller documentary.
Brilliant.
Which may be my favorite mental health documentary I've ever seen. I've watched it, I can't tell you, Michael, so many times, especially in 2020 when COVID was at its biggest peak. I was at home because we were off school, and I had just graduated high school and was getting ready to go into university. And there was a lot of stuff going on in the world, you know, like I was going through stuff. My mental illness was at its worst. And that's where you guys came in, because I had always seen your Lands blogs, and that's what really got me into it. And then I watched Mauro Ranallo's documentary, And that's another guy that maybe one day I would love to collaborate with. And I'm sure you have many times. He's very candid and open and honest. But at the same time, I saw your Lands vlogs and I decided to put out a video stating, yeah, I battled mental illness. And it was hard for me to do at the beginning because I didn't want to be looked at as weak, like, and in wrestling too, because especially because I want to be a wrestler, they look at a lot of people with mental health issues as liabilities. Like, oh, they're not reliable, they're not going to get pushed, or they're not going to be at the top of the card. And that's something that I was worried about before I came out with it. But then once I did, and I tagged you, I just tagged you because I wanted to show that Sick Not Weak was something that was going to hopefully get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I didn't expect you to respond. And that wasn't my intention. But so I put, as Michael Landsberg says, sick, not weak, and, stay, and the stigma. And you commented back, I can't even tell you, like maybe 5 minutes later. And you said, don't worry about it. I'm on your team now. And ever since that, it changed. And that's not me kissing your ass either. That's me fully being 100% candid. That moment made me find out who Keegan Dimitrovic was. Because before that, I was hiding everything, even in high school, and in university, I was hiding it. But then once that happened, I truly came out with it. And now it's almost like my whole personality is sick, not weak now, especially on Twitter. And I do that because it's something that's really, really been there for me. Like, you guys always comment on my stuff. You give me great feedback. You help me out when I'm not feeling the best. And that truly means a lot to me. So then yeah.
So let me just jump in and say that I think that everyone that joins the team or the family, so to speak, whether it's, actually online using the hashtag Sick Not Weak, or whether you're just on any platform or just in the platform called your life, where you meet people and you talk to people, anybody who's sharing their mental illness has the ability to change somebody else's life and maybe save that life. And you may never know the person who's getting impacted by your words. I mean, you could go to a house party with 20 people and you could be saying, hey, this would be kind of weird if you did this, but this would be what I would do now. If I realized that there were people that could benefit from the talk, I would say, hey, I just give me 2 minutes to speak to everyone. And I would say, hey, you may think that you're the only one, but you're not the only one. In fact, if you think you're the only one, then you need to look around and you need to understand that there's tons of people that battle mental health problems. There's tons of people who have depression. There's tons of people who are medication. And sadly, there's tons of people who have suicidal thoughts. So it's not rare. And every person that has been through what you and I have been through has the ability to change the way somebody else sees it. And you know what it's like, to tie it into your world. If you're cutting a promo, you would never cut a promo to say, hey, if you got nothing else to do, you should, join us for Raw. I know we're like, it's wrestling and you may not love wrestling or you may think it's silly. Like, no one would cut a promo like that. That's weak, right? So everything that you say in that context, you say with strength. You need to see this match. You need to see me destroy someone. That's the way you talk about when you do a wrestling promo. But that's the way you should talk about mental health too. Not destroy someone, but with that same level of, I'm not ashamed, I'm throwing it all out there.
The same purpose and the same intensity, I think, is needed in every facet of whether that's the pro wrestling world or the mental health world. And All Elite Wrestling, AEW, literally just came out last year with this 7-8 minute mental health video where it showed a lot of the wrestlers like Eddie Guerrero's widow Vicky and a lot of other people coming out with their struggles with mental health. And in pro wrestling, mental health is a very touchy subject because a lot of the wrestlers get a lot of crap from people on the internet. I see it every single day. I see what these guys go through, and they're people too, right? And I try to say that in a lot of interviews that I do with other podcasters is that you guys, you heckle them and you say all these nasty things, but you don't know really what they're going through because really they're just on TV and they're taking bumps for a living, and it's a painful job, very painful job. We've seen a lot of tragedy in the business over mental health. And I'm not going to get too into the tragedies and stuff, but like you look at what happened in 2007, with Chris Benoit and you look at what happened with him, a lot of people I see on Twitter, they'll go on there and go, oh, F him, screw him, you know, for what he did. And you've actually interviewed him a couple times and your interviews with him were fantastic. But you couldn't tell maybe he was going through something, right, that no one else knew. And we find out later, okay, yes, you know, he looked like this in the interview and he looked like this in the ring, but then you see truly what happened afterward and you go, man, like, could this have been prevented? If the mental health stigma would have, you know, been erased in 2007, because it was still pretty prominent back then. If it was still erased back then, would this tragedy have been prevented? Would he still be here with us today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't have an answer for it, but I have my feeling at the time when I interviewed him a few times. He kept calling me sir, and I kept saying, Chris, why are you calling me sir? And he respect. And I said, don't call me sir, call me Michael, call me Landsberg, call me ML, call me anything you want, but don't call me sir.
Yeah.
And he actually, not as a joke, went moments later, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I felt like he was a difficult guy to connect with. I felt like that we were, there was something between us that prevented, you know, real communication. And, you know, from him, I felt like he was locked off, blocked off. And as a result, I remember saying afterwards, I mean, I had no idea. I never thought this could be, you know, mental illness. I remember saying to the guys that I knew, like Jeff Merrick, who helped me with all those interviews. I said, Jeff, you know, Chris, and he was buddies with Chris. I said, he's just a really unusual guy. Which isn't an insult.
Right.
He was just an unusual guy. And if someone would have gone to him and said, you know, Chris, you're, you know, like you're walking the edge here and you need to get help, right? I doubt he would have listened because wrestling meant so much to him.
Yes.
I mean, he was a wrestler. And even though he took so many bumps and so many shots to the head, he should have quit, right?
Yes.
He should have quit wrestling. And I mean, I'm not revisiting this. It's kind of old news, but you know, it's very possible someone should have told him, you got to quit wrestling. But he was so committed to it. That would have been a really hard sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I only use him as an example because he's the biggest example for wrestling with mental illness. And like, you can look at the stuff with CTE and all that stuff, but really it makes me think too, it's like if he would have been in this era and he was wrestling right now, even with all the concussion protocol and whatever, he would have been forced to retire. But then that could have also been another hurdle for him too, right? Because like you said, he was so passionate to a fault. And I think that happens to a lot of even pro wrestlers, is when it's taken from them, like Bryan Danielson, for example, too. He was forced to retire in 2016. Granted, he's back now, but for that few years he was retired, you saw a downward spiral with him, you know, where he was ready to give up until he eventually got cleared. But they told him in 2016, they said, Bryan, you have a 1% chance of wrestling again. And he couldn't accept that. And even though he did come back, not everybody can come back. And that's the one thing too that I wanted to mention in wrestling, is that up until like maybe 2 years ago, mental health wasn't really a big thing. And a lot of wrestlers get a lot of flack for that. They get a lot of flack for their actions outside the ring and stuff. But really, if it's somebody else doing another job, they don't get as much, right? Because they're not in the media and they're not as prominent on TV as, let's say, a Chris Benoit or a Bryan Danielson or guys like that. And that's not to ever excuse, you know, his actions, because his actions are absolutely atrocious. But you can look at it too and be like, if he was suffering, and we know he was suffering because there's diaries and there's stuff like that. We know the information. But at the time, it always makes me wonder, if mental health would have been as prominent as it is now and will be in the future, could we have maybe helped him out? Could we have, you know, maybe tried to steer him into another direction? Because I felt the same way too, you know, like I think about that with wrestling every day because it's all I've ever loved. I've loved pro wrestling since I was 3 years old. And when I got bullied and hazed in school and stuff, it was the one thing that kept me going. So it's like, I can't really imagine a life without it. So it's something too that I would have to accept, that if I was ever in that position where I start wrestling and they tell me, hey, you can't do this anymore, you're done, you know, if something ever happens, I would have to accept that. And it would be a very emotionally unhealthy future for me. Like, for example, with Edge, when Edge retired in 2011, who you've also interviewed quite a few times too. And he's a great guy. And I wish I wish that he didn't lose 10 years of his career, but really it did save his life. He even said, like, I had a very emotionally unhealthy time when I was forced to retire because this is all I ever knew. Right. And it's like, I wanted to correlate mental health into wrestling. And I want to do that when I get in the ring too. That's why I've done my best the last 4 or 5 years to try to build some kind of following. So when I get in the ring, you can also know me as the mental health wrestler. That's 100% fine with me. If that's what people label me as, and I never win a world title, but my goal was that I've helped pro wrestlers come out with their mental health and maybe save their jobs with their mental health, that would mean everything to me. And that's all based off of the genesis of Sick Not Weak, where you guys have really told me, like, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And that's the quote too, but it's also a prominent quote that you guys use. And it's really meant a lot, not just to me, but I'm sure to a lot of other wrestlers, because I know there are other wrestlers too that follow Sick Not Weak, like Scott Demore, who lives in my city, who's the vice president.
Scott Demore was a guest on OTR many times.
Yeah, he's the vice president of Impact now.
He can't be a vice president of anything. There's no way. That guy doesn't own the suit. There's no way. And I'm saying this is a joke because, we were buds back in the day. I haven't seen him in ages. But, Scott was always a great guest for us because he liked to debate. He liked to scrap. I think he liked to scrap off camera, like physically, probably. He was a guy who would go, yeah, I'd go, yeah. But on camera, he made actually, there was a country singer named Stephanie Beaumont, who they were debating, and he just carved her and she started to cry. And it was like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is terribly uncomfortable. It looks terrible, especially, when a big man makes a very small woman cry. It does not, the optics are not good. But my point is that he was a really good debater. And please, if you're watching, Scott Demore, hey, bud.
Yeah, he actually lives in the same city as I do, and he runs the Can-Am Wrestling School. And even though I'm going to go train at Black and Brave, which is Seth Rollins' school, I would love to train with Scott down here too, because we have a very world-renowned wrestling school as well, and he runs the Border City wrestling events, which are always great. I go to every single one of them, and hopefully one day we could work together, because one, we're fellow Canadians, and two, I think if I could bring mental health into any facet of the business, I'm going to try to do it, because I would be, I believe, the first to really make it not a gimmick, but it would be a part of my main personality. And because it is my true personality, and I don't really want to just play a character. I want to, with the volume turned up, obviously, but I want to be me, because I think authenticity is what also draws. Like, if you look at what draws in the business, like look at the Montreal Screwjob with Brett and Vince, based off of 100% authenticity, because Vince was the corrupt, the corrupt chairman that really screwed Brett, and Brett was pissed about it, and Brett knocked him out. So authenticity draws. Even with Stone Cold Steve Austin, there was a big amount of authenticity, and I feel like if I could not emulate Austin or Brett, but bring that into the business, where I can essentially say, hey guys, I am the mental health wrestler. You want to call me that? That's 100% fine. I'm going to show you that, yeah, I am sick, but I'm not weak. And I'm going to try to flourish in this business in the best way I can. And show you that if you do have mental health issues, whether you're in grade school, high school, university, you can go in the ring or do whatever job you want to do and still be the best at it, regardless of the situation. So if that's what I can leave behind eventually, I would take that over main eventing WrestleMania or winning a world title or the WWE championship. So that's my main goal. And it's because of Sick Not Weak that happened, because you guys showed, like I said, you guys showed me it's okay to really admit your struggles, and you're not going to be looked at in a certain way. So for that, I kindly appreciate it. But I also too wanted to mention, have you guys ever planned on maybe trying to expand globally too? Because I know you guys are very popular in Canada and in America, but has there ever been any thoughts of maybe touring elsewhere and maybe doing talks maybe in like other countries or anything in that nature, if that's a possibility?
Yeah. So here's the challenge. The challenge is that we are, a tiny operation, and, our impact has been, you got to let me finish this before you think I'm just an ass for saying it this way.
Okay.
Our impact has been huge on a few people. Like you were talking about the value of it to you, but we're still we're this big. And becoming a lot bigger is something I can't do. It's not my expertise. I'm not wired that way. So we need someone who looks at what we do and says, yeah, you know what, I think that's a great message. I like the way you talk about it. And, you know, I'm going to help you get this out there. I can't do it. You know, it's just, I'm not a promoter.
Right.
And I'm only one person. And so that's kind of why we have remained this big.
Yeah, and I think too, even without promoting, I think organically, because of the mental health movement, it's just going to get bigger. And I say that because anything now that's promoting mental health, it usually has a positive message behind it. And I'm hoping to, like, regardless of where I wrestle, whether it's WWE, AEW, Impact, New Japan, or even if it's in the indies somewhere, I'm gonna send that message, because to me it's like a universal truth. You know, like, everybody to some extent, whether they admit it or not, struggles with mental health. It's just on a big severity scale. Like you guys have the Sichter scale, which you have actually sent me. And I've used that Sichter scale quite a bit of times. And I think everybody could use that and kind of address how they're feeling on a daily basis. Like for me, when I first started using it, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the hospital the day I was hospitalized, which was, I think, a couple months after I started with Sick Not Weak and started collaborating. And it was a really bad day. It was October 6th. Like I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was October 6th, 2020. And I remember they came and carted me out in an ambulance, and it was a pretty tough day. And I thought to myself that day, I said, this is going to be a story that one day I hope I can share, and not to inspire, but to show people, like, hey, you're not alone. You know, like, you never know who's going through this. And to even give you a prime example, like, I already have a lot of my wrestling gear made, and it means that much to me. Like, I have,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, like, I got the hashtag on my knee pads. I got it on my kick pads, and I hand drew them too, just to add some other layers. Like on my kick pad, I got,
Love that.
yeah, I got the hashtag, and then I got gloves done too for in the ring, which has got the hashtag. Because to me, a hashtag is a huge movement, and I think that if I could spread that hashtag, it can expand even bigger into other countries and other places where other people are suffering. And even like I have my tights too, and I got, like, I hand drew the logo, but it's, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's got the hashtag and it's got SNW and then ET.
Love that. Oh
Yeah.
man, you take a picture of that with,
Yeah.
like, put it on later, take a picture of it with the gloves on and whatever else, the knee pads, and send it to me.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's got like the semicolon too, because that's the semicolon's a big thing for me. So I hand drew all that, and then got the gear maker to kind of really make it into a real logo.
Yeah,
So,
it looks great.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it means a lot to me. So it's going to be incorporated in pretty much almost every part of my gear, because again, if it wasn't for that, I might not be here right now, because on that day, on October 6th, it was that day that I might take myself out, and I didn't. So I'm still here, and yeah, it's been tough. Yeah, the tattoo. Yeah, you just got that done.
I still have the tape over it for another
Awesome.
day. I just got it a day and a half ago. But you were talking about your date when you were hospitalized and diagnosed, I guess, with bipolar.
Yeah.
That is your date. My date was 11/24/08. YUL being Montreal Airport code, MH5210400. I have tattooed that on me because it's a conversation starter for people. You know, hey, what is that? When I'm giving a speech, I can refer to it and say, you know, you don't know how painful this is for, you think you're the only one. And I'm telling you, on this day, not only are you not the only one, but you are understood, and people feeling they're understood. I'm telling you, as you go through the opportunities to share with people, what people really need is they need to feel, oh my gosh, like Keegan, he understands me. And the only way you can get someone to think that they understand you, or that you understand them, is to not only say, hey, you know, I have bipolar, but to say what it does to you. What does it make you feel? Not the symptoms that you would get if you Googled bipolar symptoms, but the way it affects your life. That's how people realize, wow, you know, maybe I'm not a loser. Maybe this isn't my fault. Maybe I'm not weak.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I felt that day at the hospital, because I was there till about 4 o'clock in the morning. and I asked to be let go because I actually felt somewhat better. And that's the thing with bipolar is your mood kind of goes back and forth and left, right, and center over even hours, days, weeks, months. And I was talking to the professional there, and I actually have this too in my book too. But I'm gonna say it here too because it matters on the video. I was sitting there and she was asking me all these questions. And if I'm being honest, I can't remember 90% of them. But I did tell her, I said, my mood goes from here to here to here to here. And I don't know why. Like sometimes I don't even know why I'm agitated. I just get agitated. And she started talking to me more and more. And about an hour and a half later, she's like, yeah, you got it. You got bipolar. And it was funny because I had been to an agency school when I was in grade 10, I believe, because I got originally kicked out of my high school. They wanted me gone because of my erratic behavior. And they sent me out and I went to an agency school, and I'll get back to it after, because we got 1 minute left here. I'll get back to it after the break. But they essentially told me I was quote unquote a low IQ student. So they asked me to do this IQ test, and I did it. I said, okay, fine. I'm in grade 10. I'm immature. I don't really know. So I took all these tests, and they said that I was quote unquote, I hate using this word, but quote unquote retarded. Like I was below the spectrum, right? And it's like, that term retarded, it's like, to me, it's like really, really stupid. But to them, it was like, no, I'm like not a functioning person in society. And that really bothered me. And I still have the papers and everything too. But I let that define me for a very long time. And now I look back at that and go, well, I'm in university now. I'm getting my double major in English and history. And two, with the agency school, I was originally kicked out, and my high school really recommended me to go to a school that kind of, I shouldn't say specializes, but let's say quote unquote specializes in mental health. And like I said, they wanted to do that IQ test thing, and I'm oblivious, right? I'm in grade 10, so I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And they did that, and that those comments on that paper, I don't know, it hurt me at the time very much. But at the same time, I thought, you know what, like I'm not gonna let this be who I am. I'm not gonna, be quote unquote retarded, which I hate that word, but for lack of a better term, for the rest of my life, because now I'm entering my third year at the University of Windsor with English and history, and I'm doing quite well. I'm in good academic standing, and I'm flourishing to some extent. University is not easy.
You should save the paper. You made reference to it, right? Like I still have it.
Yeah.
You got to take a picture of that so you always have it, because that will be something you can use in the future when you're talking about your past and when you're trying to help people feel less shame and alone, and how we can be knocked down, and if we listen to what other people say about us, then sometimes it can set us into a totally different direction. You need to hold on to that.
I'm going to. And the thing is too, like I kept all my records and all my papers and my report cards and all that stuff. So I look back at that now as a motivator, because it wasn't even just to like at school that stuff was happening. Like when I was a kid, I was always an overweight kid. Like I don't know why, I just was like, not so much now because I can somewhat work out, but even from my own family, which outside of my mom's family, it was my dad's side, they really picked on me quite a bit. And I didn't know why, because I was the youngest kid, right? Like my sister's 12 years older than me, so she didn't really get that kind of treatment. And plus we have two different dads. So when I was a kid, I got my nipples pulled and grabbed and stuff, and like all that weird stuff by like adults, right? Like they would like grab them and crank them, and they'd say, oh, you look like a bull with that haircut, or Keegan, where are your ankles? Just like little comments like that, or like they would trip me down the street or something, and just like little stuff like that. But it's stuff I didn't really forget. And like I saw a lot of stuff too. Like I saw my dad get attacked, and just a lot of that stuff that I wish I hadn't seen as a 9-10-year-old kid. But that stuff really screwed me up for a very long time. Like I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about it, and that was really tough on me. But once I got into like grade 12, I really started to embrace it. I started to say, you know what, like, yeah, this is a lot of pain. and a lot of struggle. But at the same time, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be in this position right now. I probably wouldn't even be being able to collaborate with you, which is an honor.
There's so many things about that you could bring out a cliche about, and one of them would be, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So all of what you went through wasn't going to kill you physically, but could have killed your spirit. But instead of killing your spirit, it stoked the flames, right? Things in our past that are painful for us, especially in your case, talking about in the context that you are about being bullied, can be a great motivator where it's like, okay, I'm gonna pay the world back by showing them that I'm not of need of special education, that I'm not weak, that I'm not just the guy that you can push around. And that's one of the places that our drive comes from, which is experience in our lives, wrongs that we want to right.
And that's the thing too. Like, I've experienced a lot of guilt over that stuff, not because I felt sorry for myself, but because I acted out based on that stuff. And I could use the excuse that, it was my bipolar disorder, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse, because when I was, like in grade 10, grade 11, I never connected with people my age. Like, I always considered myself like the Brock Lesnar of kids, like where I just, I liked my distance. I didn't like to be bothered, and if you came close enough to me, I would probably lash out. That's how I was, because I only lived with my mom, because this was after the other abuse. Like, I 100% lived with my mom, and if I lived with her the entire time, I would probably be the happiest person going right now, right? But because she's given me a great life that I'm grateful for. But at the same time, when I was in school, I didn't like to be bothered. Like, I remember the one comment a CYW, a child youth worker, put on my thing, and she said, "You need a do not disturb sign on your desk." And I said, is that an insult, or is that, or is that something that can be worked on? Because I don't want that label on me that I'm some loose cannon. And I remember like the way I would talk to people my age, because I didn't trust any of them, because a lot of people my age, they weren't interested in pro wrestling like I was. They were out partying and doing drugs and, doing all this other stuff. And I was at home watching WrestleMania, or I was at home watching interviews, or I was home watching Kurt Angle, or something like that. And so I couldn't really relate to anybody, but I kind of became something that I didn't want to become, where I was insulting people because I was scared they were going to insult me first. And that's a part of the sickness that a lot of people don't realize, because a lot of people in the media will say, oh, he insulted this person, screw him, for saying that. And I own up to it. But at the same time, you'll get a lot of other people who don't take the mental health thing into effect. And there are people who are sorry for their actions and sorry for, stuff that they say or do. And that's a big thing, is self-redemption. And I actually have redemption tattooed on my stomach, because my weight was something that was very, sensitive to me, something I always got bullied over. So I have that on my stomach as a lifetime reminder that to some extent I have achieved redemption. And also too, not just about me, but also to you, you've also achieved redemption of your own in many ways, especially with Building Sick Not Weak, which is something that has really, like I said, inspired a lot of other people, and has shown that mental illness itself can be a global unity for everybody. So my question to you is, when did you, and I know some of the answers off the documentary, but more specifically for other viewers, when did you start to experience anxiety and depression?
Well, anxiety for sure in my earliest memories as a child included anxiety. And it wasn't until that I got older that I could piece together the things that I was experiencing. And when I figured out, oh my gosh, like I never knew what the name was. I never knew there was such a thing as general anxiety disorder. I never knew there was such a thing as mental illness, because nobody in my life ever talked about it. And it was just foreign to me. So here I am, and I have these things that I'm afraid to do because of my anxiety that I don't do, but I don't tell people, well, I can't go on a bus because of my anxiety. I just say, well, I can't go today, or I can't go on that field trip. And it really shaped a lot of my life. And if I would have had access to a community of people that would have said, yeah, me too, it would have made a huge difference in my life. So right from my earliest memories, I remember battling anxiety, but depression was new to me. I guess it was just after we started off the record that I realized one day when I put down the phone, it's like, okay, yeah, no, okay, bye. I put down the phone and I thought, why did I just say no to an offer to do something that I would jump at normally? And I thought, wow, that's really weird. And then I thought, because I don't want to go out, because I don't want to be around people, because I just want to be left alone. And I started to go back and look at the previous 6 months of my life. And I realized that that's who I had developed into. I had become a person that I did not know and a person I did not like. And as a result, I had ceased to live the life that I was living before, but no one knew that because I was wearing a mask, as we all get, really good at. So that was kind of the realization for me that I was experiencing something totally different, something totally new. And honestly, the worst thing that I can ever imagine. Depression was not what I thought it was going to be. I mean, not that I was anticipating having it, but when I would hear somebody has depression, I would think, oh, well, I guess they're just sad. Or I guess, you know what, maybe they're just weak, right? Like they can't get out of bed. Like, hey, look at me. This is before depression. Hey, look at me. I'm walking around, like I have bad days, but I don't need to go to the doctor. And for me, it was this awakening that there's this awful thing out there which takes control of you as opposed to you taking control of it. And that was, for me, the first step towards getting help, was realizing, there's something really, really wrong with me.
And I thought the same thing too, to elaborate. When I first started experiencing depression, I was probably around 10, I want to say. And it started with my dad getting attacked. That's when it really started, because that was at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not going to always name names, but somebody came into the house, threw a shoe, like the heel of a shoe, at his face, because we were sleeping. He was on the floor, I was on the couch, and he got a shoe whipped at his face and he got attacked in the bathroom. That's when I really started to experience like post-traumatic stress. It was a really big deal. But before that, with anxiety, I didn't know what anxiety was up until maybe I was like maybe 14, when I really started to figure out the term anxiety, because like my grandmother was in the hospital, she had gangrene, and my family made me see that. Like they took the blanket off and made me look and stuff like that. And that to me was traumatic for me, because I was a kid and I thought like, oh, this is somebody rotting, or like something like that. So that was very traumatic for me. And that's where my anxiety kind of came in and my phobias came in. But then depression was on that September night, which was, I believe, 2 days before I started in grade 5, where my dad got attacked. So, I mean, that stuff is where it really spiraled for me. But at the same time, now that's years down the road. And granted, I still can feel it mentally to this day. I have been able to say, okay, you know what? That happened in the past. I need to move on. But at the same time, try to come up with a lesson learned from it. Like, okay, when you're an adult, maybe don't get drunk or high and go attack people. As broad as that sounds, because that's what happened. That's why I stay away from alcohol and, drugs and that, because I've seen the effects it has on people. And if people can control it, more power to them. Have it, consume it, just be responsible. I can't do that, because if you're bipolar and you drink and you're doing stuff like Mauro Ronaldo can attest to this, what he did with alcohol, where he was speeding up and down the streets while in a manic state and drinking. He was pulled over by the Mounties. Like, that's why he doesn't drink either. So I can use that as a relatable example. Like, okay, I won't drink, I'm not going to do drugs, I'm not going to smoke, I'm not going to do all that, because that is going to be catastrophic, not just for me, but for other people around me. So the lesson that I learned is to be mindful of also who's around you. And when you said depression too, with sadness, I always tell people this on Twitter. I say a lot of people, they can't differentiate depression with temporary sadness, because depression is like a complete loss of everything, a loss of hope. And I know what that feels like, because like there's times where you can be sad for about 5 or 10 minutes and then you can move on, but depression is something that's ongoing and recurring. And that's the difference between depression and sadness, at least the way I've experienced it. So I'm very happy that you pointed that out. But the other thing too that I wanted to ask is, what was it like when you were a teenager with depression and anxiety? Because I know in today's day and age with social media, it's a lot more complex than it was maybe without social media.
I think for me, first of all, I didn't experience depression as a kid.
Okay.
I had no idea really what it was. And when I first realized, as I described before, this turning down this one offer to do something that was fun, it was a total shock to me. It was like, oh my God, this explains why I've changed and become a different person. Anxiety, forced me to not do certain things that kids did. And as a result, I think I started to go into my shell, where I was, I think an interesting person in my own house. But when I was out, I think I was afraid to actually be me. And what really gave me access to the me that I knew I could be, but wasn't, was broadcasting. Right? It was like, okay, the only thing I want to do is talk about sports on TV. And when I realized it's time to dive in because you got nothing else, no second choice, no safety net here. Until I realized that, I think that I was only exposing half of me to the world. And then all of a sudden I do it and I realize, hey, I can be okay at this. And that gave me the confidence to, I think, to come out both professionally and personally.
Yeah, and you were absolutely great on off the record too. And the thing is also, it's like when you were interviewing guys off, like even pro wrestlers on off the record, you when you're an interviewer, you can't really tell whether somebody's struggling or not without really not one asking, but two insinuating. And when you were interviewing guys like Kurt and Brett and all those guys, you kept up with them fully. Like even if they threw something back, or even if Vince threw something back at you, you knew how to respond. And as an outsider, before I knew about Sick Not Weak and all that, I was like, man, this guy really can keep up with these guys, and he's a great interviewer. But I didn't know, right? So it's like you can look at somebody from the outside and go, okay, they have it all together. But then,
oh, for sure, yeah.
But then behind closed doors, right? It's like, oh
right.
man, like they're struggling. They're just like me. They're human beings. Like Kurt Angle, for example, when you interviewed him, he had so many neck injuries and knee injuries, and he was all banged up. He was physically banged up, but then later on, he became mentally banged up, because I think it was 2 years after your 04 interview with him, he completely walked out of WWE. He had a broken neck. He was wrestling with a broken neck. He had a whole torn growing that was like purple and pink, and his knees were all messed up. And nobody knew that because it was all internal. So everybody's struggling no matter what their fame or fortune is. And the other thing too is that a lot of these guys too, and not even just wrestlers, but a lot of athletes and a lot of people who are in the media, they had a lot of trials and tribulations in their childhood. Not all of them did, but a lot of times their childhood affects how they are currently. And I guess I'm an example of that too, even though I'm not in the ring yet. But it's like I want to use that kind of as a motivator, whether I'm going to be a baby face or a heel, which I'd kind of rather be a tweener, if I'm going to be honest. Like I'd kind of rather be in the middle, because there's so many shades of gray now that I think you're either going to be looked at as a really good guy or a really bad guy, depending on what your thoughts and beliefs are. So I think if you could take advantage of that and really make it into your own, I think that's what could work. But I still want to do it though, like respectfully within the mental health community, which leads to my next question. If there is any way too that I can keep promoting Sick Not Weak when I'm in the ring, which is going to be next year, I would 100% love to do that, and keep collaborating and keep spreading that message as well. So in what other ways from an outside perspective could I keep contributing?
I think what comes to mind right away is that when you are in that world, you have everybody has a camera with them at all times. Shoot stuff. That's the impact that that's at your fingertips, like literally. So if you're hanging with Kurt Angle, for instance, like even in the near future, obviously you have a relationship with him, and say, okay, you know what I'm going to do? Hold on, Kurt, I'm just going to ask you 2 questions about mental health, and you do something, even if it's at best, if it's a minute long.
Yeah,
that's gold. That's that's where you implement change in people. When you don't say to them, just, you are not weak. When you show them strength when talking about it, it's better to show people, to display a certain quality, than it is to tell people that you have that quality. Like, I think that's where the gold is.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, because that's great advice too, because even with like Mauro Ranallo's documentary, he recorded himself in very uncomfortable times. And it was like, he was breaking down. Like there was one in his hotel room where he was completely at a loss. And that to me resonated, because it's all about authenticity. And he was showing the most uncomfortable parts. And my gratitude for him and my respect for him is unlimited for that, because that takes a lot, especially when you're in the public eye. It takes a lot to really come out with that kind of stuff and say, hey, I'm really messed up right now, for lack of a better term. Like, I'm not okay, but it's okay, because I'm showing you that even though I'm this big name, I can still not be susceptible, but I can still show you that I'm also a normal person, right?
I agree.
Yeah, and that's where that documentary really resonated, and that's where it started for me with the Sick Not Weak community. Is I watched that documentary because I was in a really bad spiral for about 3 months, and I watched that documentary 2-3 times a day, every day, no exaggeration, because it motivated me. It kept me going. I went, he's doing this, and he's struggling, but he's still the best commentator of our generation, in my opinion, and he's a fantastic commentator. Like, I don't think there's anybody like him, and he's the best at what he does, and he's doing it with, I don't want to say this limitation, but he's doing it with this tribulation of his. And I want to prove that I can be in the ring with that tribulation, and they don't got to worry about me as a liability. They don't got to worry whether I'm not going to show up, or I'm not going to, make a town, or I'm going to be unpredictable. I want to show that I can still be a functional person. And the other example that I have too is when I was still at that agency school, they put me on Concerta, Zoloft, and Abilify all at the same time, which are three, I'm sure but they're three very big medications for depression and anxiety. And it's big because they said, oh, he's got ADHD, and he's got ADD, and he's got all that. And maybe I do to an extent, but there was a bigger picture that we needed to look at, which was bipolar disorder. And they put me on all three of those medications, and I was about 150 pounds. I started to really get thin because I was so worried about my self-image that I wasn't eating a lot. And then I blossomed from like 155 pounds to over 270. I was almost
wow. Yeah.
Within about 3 months, I want to say. It was about 3 months. So that's pretty quick. Like, I ballooned. Like, I have pictures too, and I'll show them to you. I blossomed like a hot air balloon. Like, I was just completely round, and I looked like somebody like shot like gas into me, and I was just completely all blown up. But I couldn't move. I had a hard time walking, and the agency school was like 10 minutes from my house, and I couldn't barely walk down without, gasping. So I knew something was wrong, and I went to Niagara Falls. My dad and I went to Niagara Falls, and we met Steve Borden, who's the legendary professional wrestler in WCW, and he was great to me. But I went up there, and they have the Niagara zip line that you can go on, and you can go from one side of the falls to the other, and there's a weight requirement. And the weight requirement was 275, and I weighed in at 270, and I didn't even know. And the girl went up to me, and she's like, "You're 270," and my heart sunk. Like, it just sunk. And I didn't know I was wearing like a 44 waist and a double X shirt, because I got that big. I blossomed. And after that day, I came back home. I want to say 2 days later, and my mom invested everything she could into getting me off the meds, because they weren't working, and my memory was very fogged at that time. They might work for somebody else. They might. Like, I know the pro wrestler Eddie Kingston on AEW, he takes Zoloft, and it does miracles for him and helps him. So it's not always going to work for everybody, but it will work for other people. And for me, it was a really bad mixture, and my memory was gone and everything. And then my mom signed me up for personal training at the gym, which was very nice, because like money was already kind of, I don't want to say scarce, but she took that initiative to really make that happen for me. And then ever since then, I took a year off of school, to focus on my mental health. The board allowed me to take a year off, and I came back to my regular high school and came back with straight A's, like 100% straight A's. And I was so proud of myself, and every day was getting better. Like, I mean, I wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect, but I really got that opportunity to redeem myself. And my old high school decided to bring me back, and I was pulling off A's left, right, and center, and at the university level. And my mom told me, she's like, "Well, you proved them wrong." Eh? I said,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate statement. It's not the statement to them is not most effective if you say, well, I'm not stupid. It's way more powerful to show them that you're not stupid,
yes," because
which obviously you did, and that's amazing. You got to wrap this up because I have got phone calls to do for Sick Not Weak, because I want to be bigger than we are. So as you inspired me to be bigger than we are.
And we'll get there. I mean, I appreciate it too. Hope to do more again in the future. And it was a very candid video message, and I 100% appreciate you coming on. And once again, thank you, and Sick Not Weak, for all you do.
Hey, thank you. You not only really shared some great stuff, and by great, I mean significant, not necessarily great. I mean, a lot of it was painful, but that's, I think, how what really resonates with people when you talk about your own experience and you do it as candidly as you did. That's going to make a difference. So tell your mom I said goodbye, and let's do this again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Have a great day.
You too.